Welcome to the Hyper Guy Motivational Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. Sorry, I've extended leave in terms of making podcasts lately, just because I've been working on my dissertation, as many of you know. So thank you so much for being here today. I have a wonderful guest today, Rob Bagot. Rob, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Martin.
And Rob is a owner and CEO of Story Machine Films. We're going to go more into that a little bit later, but it's branded content advertising. Is that correct, Rob?
Yeah, advertising and branded content and everything in between that.
So anyway, thank you. Welcome back to the show. So we're going to dive into the art of storytelling and then brand messaging and what it takes to stand out in a noisy advertising world. You're a third-generation UC Berkeley alumni who won his first Clio during his senior year. We're going to talk about that a little bit. That's pretty cool. He written, produced, and directed brand campaigns for companies like Apple, Toyota, Microsoft, Cisco, and Callaway Golf. Have I missed anybody?
Oh my gosh, probably like 100 other clients there, but those are some of the bigger names. Yes.
He's also founder of Story Machine, a hybrid production company built to bring full agency creative depth directly to businesses without massive overhead. And so we're just going to dive right into this. You were talking about how many companies you've done this for. So how long have you been in the business and how long have you been doing this for?
This is so funny. I think I've been in the business for 50 years, but it's not quite that. So it all started in my junior high. So I was in 7th grade, and sometimes speakers come in and they talk to the school. We had like one in my 3 years there, but that one person was an advertising jingle writer. And he wrote really cool jingles that all the kids were familiar with for like Levi's, like fall into the gap, C&H pure cane sugar, C&H pure cane sugar.
Oh yeah. Yes.
All this stuff was like baked into your head. And then one day this guy appears and you go, wait, you can get paid for that? Because I was always like a creative kid. I like to write and stuff like that. And he was casually dressed and all the kids were laughing. And you go, you mean that's a career? I could do that? So, advertising. So I went to the card catalog in the library, that kind of oak and bronze thing, and looked up advertising. And there was a couple books on advertising, even in the junior high library. And one was written by David Ogilvy. It was Confessions of an Ad Man, and it was written in the 60s. And it just started to give you a sense of what advertising was all about. I thought advertising kind of came off the production line with the cars. You didn't know there was an industry behind it. It just appeared. And then to understand that there was, an industry behind it and a kind of a strategic purpose, and that they were trying to decode the consumer and telling their stories, it was like mind blowing, because then you realize that everything's marketing. We dress in the morning, it's a marketing decision. We buy a car, it's a marketing decision. How we organize our lives, all this is an outward marketing decision. So everything is packaging and marketing. And so then the world became a laboratory. Why is it that way? What are they doing with that billboard? So in our culture, you could just study advertising. It's right in front of you every day. And so from 7th grade on, that's what I did.
So when you decided to go to college, and how many plays did you? So did you you got this advertising bug? You kind of figured it out. Like, hey, you know what? This is something that this can actually tap into the creative side of me, and I can see how this can. It's not only creative, but also it helps businesses make money, right? Right. So you can use both sides of like what you like to do.
Yes.
So and you can make a living on it. So, when you decided, did you apply to any place besides Berkeley, or where did you apply?
That's a great question. So yes, I did. I have two brothers. One went to school at Cal Poly. So I applied to the Cal Poly Journalism School. And then I applied to Cal English, Cal, and the goal was to be an English or history major at Cal or be a journalism major at Cal Poly. And, we're actually a 5th generation Cal family. So my great grandfather graduated from Cal in the pharmacy school in 1896.
Can you explain for our listeners what Cal is? Because we have listeners all over the world. So what does Cal mean? And why is it just called Cal?
Yeah. So Cal is one of the world's leading research institutions, and it has a huge science background. And a lot of Cal is financed by the Department of Defense, meaning they do research on atomic structure, nuclear bombs. They design nuclear bombs there, and they do a ton of other research. And the government funds them for this research. Cal is short for California, and Cal existed before, let's say, UCLA or something like that.
So it's it's the University of California.
Yeah, University of California, Berkeley.
But and there's a lot of schools in the University of California system. But everyone seems to somehow, everyone seems to say, when you say Cal, everybody knows it's Cal Berkeley, right?
Yeah, Cal was the first one. And so I think they got the shorthand Cal, right? And then UCLA came along and all these other California-based schools, but Cal got that, the shorthand. And then Cal is typically associated, or at least they're trying to do this, with the athletics. So it's the Cal football team or the Cal water polo team. And they're attempting to call the rest of the school Berkeley. So, they have like this two names thing. I always refer to it as Cal just because that's what everyone around me always called it. But people also do know it as UC Berkeley or Berkeley. But those names are interchangeable.
And we know it's one of the top, and probably a lot of people don't know this, but they're probably one of the top public institutions in the whole world in almost every academic field. And and English is they have one of the best English departments.
That's true. Yeah,
in the world, very difficult to get into.
Yeah, supposedly one of the best English department in America. Now, when I went to school there, I guess they had that reputation, and then English kind of fell out of favor, and now it's storming back. So the English department is highly impacted, and people want to be English majors at Cal Berkeley because it has a really great history in that. But it's nice to see the liberal arts coming back, because Cal is kind of known as being a computer science school, a business school, a biology, biosciences school, but it's also really great in the liberal arts. And they have really smart professors in that department.
Yeah, I know. And they also had, a lot of people don't know, one of the first criminology programs in the country.
Really?
One of the best ones in the country.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it faded away during the 60s when they had
exactly
people's parks and so forth. So how was your experience at Cal? And when you were at Cal, what made you go into that instead of just say business? Because you knew you wanted to do advertising, right?
Strangely enough, so I didn't know the route into advertising. I had read all these books, and largely they were kind of business books on advertising. I knew I wanted to be a creative person, but my strategy was to go in as a business person. So I was a business major for 2 years of my life at Cal. When I became a junior, all of a sudden I started to kind of accept my creative identity. And I found out that you can get into advertising with your creative work. And so then I was like, well, okay, I'm kind of done studying business. I got a lot out of it, incidentally, but I transitioned to English at that point.
And then you transitioned to English. And when you finished your degree, well, let me ask you really quickly, what was your experience like at Cal? Was it a difficult school? Are you glad you were an English major?
100%. Yeah, Cal was great. I like big places. And so in a big place, you can kind of find your tribe or whatever, and you could be an individual because, it's not like 500 people in a school and you're always kind of like worried about who you are and a limited clique. And Cal just has like all different thinkers there, right? And so it's really open that way. It's a really creative place. And I think some of it is because, it's kind of like people have a protest vibe there. People are always challenging the institutions and the kind of, traditional ways of thinking, which is great for a creative person, and it's welcome there. There's a lot of schools that, actually are the opposite, where there's so much tradition that it limits kind of new thinking. So Cal was really wide open that way. And then you're you're still in a pretty big metropolitan area. And luckily for me, San Francisco had, like, even though it was a smaller place, it had a first class, advertising community. Thank God, because when I had to go look for a job, I wasn't going to travel around the country. I was fortunate I can get on BART and go and like bother people and try to get interviews.
So yeah, I think and maybe I don't know if this is true now, but I assume that the advertising hubs of the United States traditionally were probably New York and San Francisco. Is that still the way it is?
Yeah, New York, Chicago was a big one, and then San Francisco. And San Francisco was like the third layer, but they had so many creative people there because it was a place of liberal, different, anti-institutional thinking, that it's a great place for creative people.
So you graduated and then you started looking for advertising jobs. And for people like me, you kind of went into it a little bit, but what is the importance of advertising and what is it? Like, what is it?
Well, advertising, it's really funny. It's like the most powerful thing. It's paid propaganda, if you want to look at it that way. It's a way of changing people's beliefs almost instantly. People will tell you that they're not influenced by advertising, yet somehow they have they want a Toyota, they want that brand, they wear Nikes. All these impressions were shaped by advertising and other things. But advertising in 30 seconds is probably the most powerful and lethal form of communications ever invented. 30 seconds and you could change somebody's life, and you could take them on a journey, and you can make them laugh and cry, and you could live in their memory all in 30 seconds.
Can you explain that, Rob? So I know I watch, especially I know we're kind of going off topic here, but this is we're kind of a free flowing podcast here. So you're saying, I know, like during the Super Bowl, those are huge ad times, and people will pay millions and $1 million for 15 seconds or 20 seconds.
Yeah.
How do they know that's so? How do they know it works? How do you know it works?
This is the fine. Okay. So I've been in this business, literally since 1986. Like I said, I feel like I started in 1976, but I started actually writing ads in 1986, and now it's 2020. So 40 years. In the 40 years that I've been advertising, nobody's actually proven on paper how advertising works. No, it just doesn't happen. All the proofs of advertising tend to be anecdotal, because you can't go inside somebody's head, and it's not a crime scene. There's no clues. There is the person's head, and then they're buying a Nike, and you're like, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. We don't know. And so you can't really prove advertising's effectiveness, except in your gut, that it kind of worked or didn't work. So what you look for when you do a Super Bowl commercial, half of their investment is they're monitoring the PR around their commercial. They pre-release the commercial so they can get in newspapers and magazines talking about the making of the commercial. So that's half the value. The other half of the value is speaking to consumers during the Super Bowl, but they're not paying that much attention. Then there's the after party, where people talk about the ads and talk about their favorite ads and whatever, and you also get media attention that way. So you're getting kind of a 3-for-1 with the Super Bowl thing. It's not only the commercial that you're hoping will change people's minds, it's the publicity and the PR around the commercial.
What about for and it's gonna lead into something else. Yeah. This question. What about for radio? Is radio still considered is it a bigger market than television or streaming, or what's going to be your biggest nowadays? Is streaming bigger?
Yeah, it's streaming. Even if you looked at the breakdown, broadcast, cable, streaming's 43% of audience hours viewing. Cable is 23% and broadcast is like 30%. So streaming already left behind cable and broadcast. And broadcast is like, television through the air, essentially. And there's still 20-30% of people that get their television viewing that way. but streaming has been growing at 8% a year for like the last 5 years.
And
It's not slowing down.
would this be considered worldwide or just the United States?
This is what I know for the United States. I have to assume that the same things are happening there. Now, the reason why streaming does well, it's connected television, and television is funded by advertisers. With connected television, people could interact with your commercial, whether that be, clicking on something, a banner afterwards, or, even responding in the comments, what have you. The more you could understand people's behaviors and what they like, and maybe even selling them something through a connected device, as opposed to like just watching something on cable, it's a much more valuable thing for the advertiser.
Now, this is going to bring me into something else, Robin. I'm going to continue going down. This is an amazing conversation to have with you, and I think it's a great for people out there because what I think is very interesting and fascinating about this is that it impacts all of our lives, and a lot of us, we don't think about it, but what you do impacts in every part of our life. And so this is going to bring me, when you're going to say, I knew this was going to come, TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
How has that impacted, like you said, influencers? They're called influencers. So how has that impacted advertising? And is it part of the advertising, the way it's going forward? Do you do that as well? Yes. How does that work?
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, I don't do a lot of that. I have done it, but I figure it's I do it, but it wouldn't be what I would call my core competency. Although clients, I've done it. I've done like interviews, and we turn those into clips, and those clips become.
Well, that's what I thought. Most of the stuff nowadays on many advertising on Instagram and TikTok and social media, they're just clips of what folks like you do.
100%. And even people that do things like this, they, listen for the hot buttons, and they take clips from this and they use that as their advertising or a way in, or even viewership. But going back to like social and influencer and stuff like that, it's a powerful thing. It's only increasing, and clients like it because, you're reaching your audience, or at least they would like to think that they're reaching their audience directly. So they have somebody that they have an audience that likes, beer, and then they have somebody that's a brewmeister talking about beer, and that person's audience trusts the influencer, right? And if they can kind of enter that relationship, they feel like they're transferring the trust from that person's audience through the person to their brand. Totally get it. What's interesting though, and so this is where there's a divide, and people have all of a sudden started to discount broadcast commercials and 30-second commercials because they don't realize what they really do. So those are transactional moments where you kind of like, oh, I love that person. They're talking about something very specific. And sometimes they're actually trying to sell you. Go to the bio and, buy this or whatever. With television advertising, you're actually doing something different. You're trying to engineer a toehold in people's memory. And this is very important. And an influencer piece is like transactional, happens in the moment, really cool. I'm sure some dopamine is unlocked. However, when I do a commercial, I'm trying to do something that I install a mental model of the brand inside somebody's head that they can summon 6 months later when they're buying a car, that they could summon 2 weeks later when they're purchasing ice cream. So, I'm in the memory business, and that's why there's a big difference. If I do something with an influencer, I'm like, this is transactional. This is the here and now, but it's not necessarily memorable. It's like a conversation you had on the street. When I do an ad, I'm trying to mess with somebody's brain, and I'm trying to reorganize it in a way that is conducive to them remembering my brand. And that's a big deal.
Yeah. And that's a huge difference because like you said, it imprints in your mind for long-term memory as opposed to short-term memory. Right. Because we know TikTok and Instagram, it goes quickly. You're only getting small snapshots, right?
Right. And the interesting thing is like either one of those isn't bad, but they work better together. So as much as we go down influencer road or even performance marketing and like, we're getting clicks and we're selling stuff, what you have to remember is that your banner is going to be twice as powerful if they bring some sort of brand memory to your logo on a screen or the mention of it through a social influencer. The magnifier is through your memory. So you got to remember that there's probably 10 pieces of marketing, you know, influencers, packaging, design, you know, and then advertising and social media, and they all work together. And people tend to like isolate one and go, is it going to be all influencers pretty soon? And you're like, no, it's a crazy mixture. And the people that get it right win.
Rob, you know, what's interesting is I thought about this from an organizational management and leadership lens, that advertising goes to even a broader if you can actually apply it to a broader context, in terms of our daily lives, in terms of when we go look for a job, when we go apply for a job. All that goes into how are you marketing yourself as a brand and so it goes about, like you said, imprinting, presentation, so all these things are interconnected, correct?
100%. So I gave a presentation to one of the agencies I used to work at last week, and it was called to interns, you know, so every year they have 8 interns. And the lady that runs the program said, can you talk about brand you know, you as a brand, what is that? And before I did that, and I did talk about that, we had to talk about what this thing, a brand is, you know, and everyone uses it, a brand, and everyone has a different definition of a brand. My definition of a brand is it's a schema, it's a mental model, it's a picture of this thing that you have in your head that you summon when you want a quick understanding of the world or a product or what you want in life. And so, you know, if you start to paint in someone's mind and you paint a Toyota as a brand in their head, when they go looking for a car, they have a very clear picture of what that thing is in their head. And they go, God, if I need a car that is super reliable and has just enough style, that's this image I have in my head of Toyota. And that's what you're doing with memory. You're kind of installing this mental model of a thing in your head. Mental models go from everything from brands to like Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. And it's a shorthand for going, God, I just worked on a group project and it seems like 20% of the people did all the work. You know, we run into it in life where it's an 80-20 rule, where we get 80% of our enjoyment on vacation in the first 2 days. In the last 5 days, we just fritter away, right? So that's a shorthand for understanding life. A brand is a shorthand for understanding goods and services. And the best people are able to create a really vivid one in people's heads, and they summon it when they go to buy a car or, you know, deodorant.
So when someone comes to you and says, and this kind of goes into what you do, you've been doing your whole life, is here's my product. I assume they come to you, here's my product, or if it's an established product, here's my product. How do I get, and this is your skill set, is how do I get this imprinted into somebody as this being a valuable product? And then, the second part of my question is, have you ever had a product that you said, I don't know if this is ever going to work, like this product?
All the time, especially during the .com era, because people would just throw out these stupid .com ideas, and they had survivorship bias, meaning like, if I put a .com on the end of it, this is going to be the most successful business ever. And all these businesses, especially the media ones, they'd always draw this chart with them at the center. We're at the center. Then we have Google, and then we have Warner Brothers. You know, like everybody just put themselves at the center of the universe because they were a .com. So I have a lot of those. And then you get people like, I do a lot of brand launches. So I was just recently working on something, and it was a GLP product, a supplement that you would take when you're taking GLPs. You lose your hunger, but you still need nutrients. Mm-hmm. And this one was going to be a GLP nutrients in candy, right? You know, and who knows, you know, and it's still in development, but it's a pretty wacky idea. And frequently, if you want to have something new and you want to break in, it has to be kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So there's crazy good and there's crazy stupid. And I'm not always one to tell. I've seen crazy stupid, what I thought was crazy, to be highly effective. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard sometimes, but I've seen bad ideas, you know, just like, no, this. You get better at that.
So yeah. So you'll give honest feedback and say, hey, maybe this is how this is.
100%. And that's why I am an independent. That's why I run my own agency, is because after, you've been in this business long enough, you're pretty good at onboarding stuff, understanding it and compressing it down. And you have to be really honest in doing that if you want to get to the essence. If you're just a nice person that is agreeable, you might actually sell the work and you might actually get more business, but you're actually not doing anybody any favors because you didn't really solve the problem. And you could only solve the problem by being really honest and direct in your assessment.
So let me ask you this. I love this, what you said, by the honest and direct. I really love this as it applies to leadership as well. Like you said, solve the problem. What does that mean to you?
Well, so solve the problem. So I don't know. Sometimes people have a real problem where they're like, we're popular with this group of people, but this group of people doesn't know anything about us. You're like, okay, I get that problem.
Mm-hmm.
You get other problems where it's like, I worked on Microsoft for like 6 years, and their problem was they didn't want to look like a monopoly. I mean, that was the unspoken problem they had. So let's make the work stand out, but let's not make it too good because we don't want all that extra attention. And so then you're like navigating a problem that is almost imaginative to them, that you can't necessarily give your best advice because I'm geared to like win and they were geared to posture. So, that's a very different thing. But once you understand it, you kind of go, oh, okay. They never said that. But the first problem you had to solve was like, well, what's really their problem? And frequently, clients won't give you their problem. They won't tell you. You're supposed to figure it out yourself. And I think the reason is that if they tell you their problem, it's usually their vulnerability. And they don't want to go around telling the world what their vulnerability is. They want you to figure it out because that's kryptonite.
I love that. And so do you think a lot of these places know what their vulnerability is and then you have to figure it out, or they don't know, or a mixture?
Both. So some don't understand. I mean, this is where it gets complex. So some understand their vulnerability and they want you to figure it out. Some are kind of like can't read the room and don't understand why, they aren't popular. And some want a truth that reflects the marketing director, which is neither here nor there. That person just might be publishing stuff that is in keeping with the way they want to present to the world, but might actually have almost zero impact on the marketplace. But it builds a good case for them continually being employed.
I really love what you said, that I think it goes actually to management again. This is also interrelated. Like you talked about how you like having your own company. The good thing about having your own outside is that you're getting a fresh look at it. You're not getting somebody that's within the organization that might have these blinders on because their organizational culture or their organizational view of it is blinding them from what that problem could be, or even the solutions. So when you bring in someone like you that doesn't have the investment in that culture, it can really change things for the positive, correct?
100%. And one of the biggest trends in advertising was big advertisers hiring in-house creative departments. So, and that's great because there's a lot of stuff that needs to get done, but you're not going to argue with the person next in the cubicle next to you, no, that's wrong, and then come in the next day. But you could argue with an agency because, you pay them, they could walk away, you could walk away. The pot will boil more if it's an outside voice. If it's an internal voice, it becomes kind of like, tense, and people don't want that in their day to day. And I don't blame them. But it does mean that maybe they aren't forcing the conversation enough to really get down to the real problem and be very honest about what they're kind of going through.
So who goes to you or the company? Do some people come with a creative idea already, or you create the slogan? How does this process work?
90% of the time they come to me with a blank page, right?
Okay.
10% of the time people have come to me, and Sometimes they've had a good idea and sometimes it's been a less than great idea. If it's a less than great idea, I will make the attempt to go, well, here's what we can do. And in half of the time, I'm successful with that. So that means like 2.5% of the time, I'm probably executing their idea. And it's usually probably a pretty good idea. But generally, somebody comes to me and they go, here's what we're trying to do, you know? And then I'm like, well, do you have a budget? Where do you want to reach these people? Money drives a lot of these decisions, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, I can give you a $600,000 commercial, but it looks like you have 20 grand. And what you sometimes you have these conversations that are like, we could do anything. And then finally you ask the money question and you realize that you can't really do anything. You know, you could do something very small. So you kind of have to get past that stage very quickly without like ruining people's dreams. But, you know, and there's a nice thing about the dream process because it informs you. But it really comes down to money and time. You know, it really does. And so you have to kind of figure out what their goals are, how much money they have, how much time they're willing to expend on this, and really how important it is to them. You know, I've worked on stuff where it wasn't that important. And a lot of these things didn't get completed, honestly. You know, they got into creative development and everyone kind of like got disinterested because it wasn't their driving concern. So you really have to be solving important problems.
What about like, how long does it typically take to create slogans and campaigns? You're creating this all from yourself. And how do you make sure that those things haven't been copied already or someone else has?
100%. That's always like, so at this stage of my career, so it's kind of strange. And people are like, no, that you can't, that doesn't work. No one does that. But I read like a book a day, you know, and I have so much stimulus in my head that when I trigger something, all these ideas are very closely spaced. So if I go like that, I have ideas instantly. And generally after 40 years, I kind of know the area I should be playing in and the tone and the manner. And all that's kind of like already in my intuition. So I come up with ideas almost instantly. And I don't mean that like, oh my God, I'm trying to, but that's the truth. If somebody starts talking, usually my first ideas are my best ideas. And I usually come up with them in a flash. It could be a day or two, but I generally have them very quickly. But that's just, I've worked at a long, hard time, like being able to not filter my stuff and then filter almost like instantly, which is just a strange thing. And I can't really explain it, but it's very quick. Now, when you work as a team, you know, there's a more elaborate dance. Everybody's contribution has to be heard. People do have to kind of fight for their idea. You have to give them feedback. They have to kind of tailor it to what you're looking for as a creative director. So it's different, but if it's just me, I come up with ideas very quickly. And usually my first ideas are better than my later ideas.
Let me ask you this. I know you probably read the book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert.
Yeah.
What do you, I mean, it's an amazing book because everything they say in there is, you probably have known about it for a long time, but he's one of the first people to actually write it all down, correct?
Right. Here's what's surprising. It's Cialdini, right? And so he's a professor at Arizona State. And he also wrote a book called Persuasion, but Influence is his big book. He wrote it in 1986. So that's the year I got in advertising. I didn't hear about influence until 3 years ago. Now, if there was a book that should have been widely talked about and widely read within advertising, it should be that book. But advertising agencies are almost averse to learning. They're almost averse to outside opinions. They're averse to processes because creativity is supposed to be kind of wild and you're not supposed to use formulas.
Gotcha.
So people don't read books that suggest formulas because it seems antithetical to creativity, which is total bullshit. But that is a great book, you know, and it outlines, you know, the 6 ways to gain influence with people. You friend them, you know, you create scarcity, you know, and I was like, when I read that 3 years ago, I was like, you know, I use all those tactics in every campaign, but I didn't know that they were labeled.
Exactly.
Nobody ever put that in a creative.
Yes.
Right?
I think what I've noticed over time is that many of the world's problems have been around forever, and we've had solutions, and we've had notions and way to deal with them, but somebody comes along and actually writes them all down, and then we read it and we go, well, I've known that for 30 years now, but
Well,
I just never like put it in a formula or anything else. And like you said, I don't even think it's a formula. I think it's a guideline. I think
it's a total guideline, but it goes to show you how averse creative people are, and agencies are kind of ruled by the creative people, and creative people are anti-formula. So if you're an account person and you go and tell the creative people to follow a formula or a guideline, they're like, I'm an artist. I don't work like that, which is so dumb. It goes back to mental models. We all have a collection of shorthands in our head that we summon. And so when I worked on something, you're like, oh, well, this is a high-end wine. Well, we probably want to embrace scarcity, or this is for a car.
Right.
We probably want to be your friend. I mean, come on.
Well, let me ask you this. In case people out there don't know what a Clio is, Clio is a pretty significant award. Can you and I'm not trying, I'm just saying this so the audience understands it. And there's in advertising, that's like the Academy Awards, essentially.
Yeah, that's what it is. Especially back in the day. There's more ad shows now. So the main ad shows are the Clios, the Con Awards. So a Con Award is like, a lion, right? This is a Clio.
Yes, I knew what that was. Right? Yes. And for our listeners, he's just showing he's showing it.
DNA award. It's a cube, kind of cool.
So you won your first one when you were in college. You hadn't even graduated college yet.
Yeah. So I did something really, once again, since I've been thinking about this since 7th grade, I understood the business better than most people in the business. And I don't mean that in a conceited way. I just was so interested and curious, and I did the work. I would walk into agencies and I would look across the desk and go, I could do your job right now. And I never said that, but that's how I felt. But so back then, usually if you got hired as a copywriter, and that's what I was, you were a journeyman. All the writers were like, they got hired when they were 30. And they were like, they did other writing jobs or traveled the world, or, they were a Jack Kerouac character, right? And I went, wow. And their books or their creative samples were typewritten text. And then they would bring a picture. Like, see, I'm writing that picture. It wasn't even like a put together ad. And I looked at that and I went, you know what? I could actually make an ad that looks better than an ad. I want my book to not look like it was thrown together. I want it to look incredibly professional, because I hadn't seen that before or heard of that. So I met a typesetter at a party. This is for desktop publishing. So to get something typeset was prohibitively expensive, and it could only be afforded by graphic, communications companies. But I met this guy at a party and I was like, would you typeset my book? And his name was Tom Hemingway, and he worked at a graphics company. And he said, sure. I was like, okay. And then I knew a friend that was studying at Brooks Institute of Photography in Santa Barbara. And I was like, hey, will you shoot some pictures for me? And so I wrote the headlines and I set the type, and it looked beautiful. And then I took the photos and they looked beautiful. And then I laminated them together, with that kind of plastic laminate. But it looked better than any book that anybody had ever made, from a kid in college. And the ads were really good. The ideas were good. And so I got out of school. I sent that book out, and I had a job within a week. And the job was writing ads for Apple Computer, which was the best. That was the best writing gig in the world. And now I'm a copywriter for the best advertising campaigns for writers in the world, And because my book was a little bit derivative of the style of the company that did Apple Computer, which was Chiat Day. And the guy that was the creative director there was like, oh my God, this is great. I was like 22. I still think about it. I'm like, oh my God, what a gift that was, and how little I really did know. But so then I took that book that I put together, and it's 5 reasons BBDO should talk to Rob Bagot, and it had 4 ads in there or whatever, 5 ads. And I sent it to the Clios. I won a Clio for best self-promotion. you know.
But again, that goes back to um marketing yourself. That's the whole irony of it. You marketed yourself, and that's the whole thing, is that you're always marketing yourself, and I think people have to understand that it really does impact every part of your life, whether you're applying for a college, it's how you are representing yourself to others.
1000%. And this is what I told that group of interns 2 weeks ago. I was like, okay, know who you are, know how the world sees you, all this. So now you've got to figure it out. No, you don't, because now you have to market the marketing, So you figured out you as a product. Now, guess what? Here comes the painful part. You have to go out there and you have to blow your own horn, and you have to go out there and sell yourself. And this is the part where everyone falls down. I even fall down there. I think when I was 20 or 22 or coming into advertising, for my first 10 years in advertising, I was like, screw this. I got nothing to lose. I'm just like, nobody has any expectations, and I'm just going to just go on blast. It totally worked. Then all of a sudden you start to put up some numbers, you become professional, and you suck at marketing the marketing, because all of a sudden you start to become like self-aware. And now I'm coming across too, self-invested. I'm pushing for myself. I'm asking people to buy shit from me. That's beneath me. I've reached this level where I don't have to market myself anymore. And that's the biggest failing of growth, is that all of a sudden you think you're above, guerrilla warfare as far as marketing yourself. Huge mistake.
And it's probably like that in leadership too. If you become
100%,
if you become too confident, you think, and I think a lot of companies, you've seen that. You've seen companies that were at the top of the heap, and they said, you know what, our brand is going to always be so good that it doesn't matter. We don't have to do the work anymore, because I'm always going to be the top of the heap, right? So you look at, car brands or certain brands, and and they've lost because they stopped investing in technology and getting the outside input and getting and doing the, like you said, the good advertising. They just
I work for some of those brands, right? And you're just like, it's entropy. Entropy is like the law of the universe. Things are going to fall apart unless you work really hard at keeping them together. And sometimes we take for granted all the things that made us good, or all the things that made our product great, or all the things that made people trust us. And they all incrementally fall apart. And then one day we woke up and like, no one's returning my call. It's because
I think that's a problem. And I'm just going to bring this up, and this is not something you bring in. I'm bringing this up as Boeing for me is a great example of that, is that they were the industry standard for so long. And then they kind of switched their model and moved from a lot of they moved from having engineers as CEOs. And I believe Boeing now has an engineer again, but they had an engineer as a CEO for years, and he was helping in the development and the design, and he had all these other engineers, and they were all fact checking each other. And then when they went to a business model and just was getting CEOs with no engineering background, the things started to fall apart. And now they're trying to put it back together again. But it should have, like you said, it was so, hey, we're Boeing. That should be good enough for you.
Yeah, there's so many rewards for taking shortcuts and maximizing profits. Oh, we don't need that wing of engineers because now we're going to do quarterly report, and I'm going to win that day. We're going to have great profits. Look at PG&E. I mean, come on, there's things that if you give somebody a monopoly, you got to be really careful, because one of the things they're going to do is kind of keep cutting corners, and at some point it breaks. And it's not like it. You wish you could draw that and point it out. It's like this, and then it breaks.
Yes, I think so. It's like you have to stay relevant. You have to, like you said, atrophy. It's like atrophy, as you said.
It is, and that's the hardest thing, because you can't measure it day to day, and everything is saying, "Oh, make it easier. You don't have to do that little thing. Cut a corner," and they add up.
So, well, let me ask you this, man. This is amazing. I can go on forever. I only have 15 minutes, so I can go on forever. This is an amazing conversation. We'll have to do a second one. Hopefully, the listeners are enjoying it as much as I am. So I know. So in advertising now, I assume that includes, and I assume now it's starting to kind of bleed over, and it has for a long time, politics, right? So there's probably a lot of ad agencies now are doing for politicians, and how to turn it or spin it a certain way. And let me ask you, and also in social media now, Instagram, you have people that have 30 million followers. Instagram, do people, is that starting to come in where like how do I grow myself, how do I advertise, like are all those things becoming part of this whole bigger lot of advertising? And then where does AI come in this?
Yeah, so
it's a big question. It's a big question.
Well, two things. So within my industry, you don't go into a big agency that does brand advertising for Coca-Cola and Toyota and McDonald's or what have you. They don't do political advertising because it's divisive for the people that work there.
Gotcha.
So you have specialty agencies that do political advertising, and they'll be aligned with one party or the other. You cannot do. Yeah, because it would be like, can you imagine you're trying to do a political ad, and let's say your agency is divided 60-40, somebody's going to be pissed, and you can't.
Very interesting. I didn't know.
That's a big.
Wow.
It's like you probably couldn't, like some agencies won't do cigarettes, and most people at the agency, if you did do cigarettes, would be like, we're not doing cigarettes. We can't kill people. And then you would have this internal divide, which is poison.
So typically what you're saying is that large
mainstream advertising.
Mainstream advertising does that, and so then there's other parts that do that. Now, what about the social media content, that kind of world now?
Well, here's interesting. I would point to the campaign for the LA mayor and the AI work done for the Spencer Pratt campaign.
Yeah, correct.
I look at that and I'm like, holy shit, that's a watershed moment where, he didn't even do those ads. Sometimes it was people just doing it on his behalf.
Correct.
That was, whether you like Spencer Pratt or not, that was incredibly powerful stuff done with AI.
And they did it. They also did it during the World Cup. They did some memes with Bellum, and I think, and then they did it with, for some of the soccer players, they put them in the same cars.
100%. And so AI, and so here's what's funny. So traditional ad agencies hate AI because I can make an ad, and I do this in a day. No joke, and I'm not, and it could be of a standard that is of a national standard. Mm-hmm. Well, they rely on a business model that they pay a team of 20 people 9 months to do that, because they have billable hours. Mm-hmm. So it's like if you were a lawyer and you're like, no, I talked to the judge and, we agreed and the case is over. Somebody would be like, fuck you, dude. We're going to bill on that forever. We want this to last for 2 years. So agencies have the necessity to drag stuff out. AI works the opposite. And so they don't want to embrace AI because it undermines their business model, right? However, that day will come. And, but the cool thing about AI is you could be in the moment. I could hear something in the world and have a broadcast style commercial answer that tomorrow, which would have taken advertising 3 months,
Wow. So that's going to change everything then.
It will. And now what's funny is we're seeing like, it's not happening yet. I'm just like, okay, and that's why I'm embracing it like all in, but that day will come.
So what do you mean you're embracing it? So let's get into a little bit. So part of your company and part of what you guys do is that you've embraced
100%. So really in, let's say August, September of last year, VO3 came out, which was Google's generative video platform. And all of a sudden people could talk. It could take generalized prompts and turn them into like believable action. And you're like, shit, this isn't perfect. But if things progress in the manner that they are, you're going to be able to make an acceptable television commercial using these tools very soon. Well, sure enough, Kling came out. Kling is a generative AI model. And all of a sudden people are talking. The visuals look really great. Then Seed Dance came out. And that's the one with like Tom Cruise and Matt Damon, like fighting like a karate. And everyone's like, is that real? I can't tell. Well, that's where we are. And so you can create stuff in AI that's highly believable and is comparable to broadcast advertising done traditionally today. And I do it every day. So that's been in the last 6 to 8 months. And so 6 to 8 months ago, I was like, okay, it's proven. this is actually what I've always wanted to do in advertising. I've always wanted to have an idea and be able to develop it fully enough to see if it really does live. If you sometimes have an idea and you sell an idea to a client, you're not sure that it works until after the shoot, and you're like, and so you're just like sick to your stomach. Is this going to land or not?
Got you.
If it's not going well, you kind of have to fake like it's great, and I just can't do that. I'm just like not that person. With AI, I can get into a spot, all of a sudden kind of like start to fall apart on me, and I could invent something new. I can change it. I can manipulate it and make it successful in an hour's time. And all of a sudden, I always come out with a winning hand, where a lot of times you produce stuff in a advertising, 9-month process, and you knew that it wasn't going to land 3 months before you actually finished the spot, but you weren't going to raise your hand and go, you know what? That idea that I sold you and that you sold your boss, I don't think it's so good. I think we need to change some shit. No fucking way. It's just not going to happen.
So you're already integrating this into your business plan and how you do things, and you've been doing it for a while. Let me ask you this. We know, like you said, it is scary for, I'm sure, some employers because that's their business model, but also probably some folks are probably, if they can't pivot, are going to lose their jobs. So, but do you think it's going to create jobs as well? And
yes.
Do you all, and so it's going to, so let me ask you, what are in your view, what are it sounds like there's more upsides than downsides. Are there some things that you worry about on the downside of it, or are people realistic? If I said to you, hey Rob, do you have to be realistic with me, or somebody that comes to you and says, hey, can you do this with AI?
Yeah. So, overarching AI, I think it has a positive thing. I think if we're lazy, then we could defer to it. And when you defer something, it starts that entropic like downswing. I think AI makes us more curious because we could ask it a question and then ask it the next question, and it keeps coming back. I think it's making us smarter, but I do think that it's smoothing out complexity, meaning that we're going to have a great surface understanding of many things, but we're not going to have as much detail understanding of things. And even like real world things, like the idea of us, and I call it, the last emperor, I saw the jobs, unemployment ranks for all these jobs, data centers gone. At the very bottom was clock repair people. Nobody uses clocks anymore. But Joy, my wife, tried to get a clock fixed recently, and she was put on a wait list. So there's people that control the last understanding of how this is done, even in a declining world, that there's a shortage of these last emperors. And nobody's going to fix cars. No one's going to fix anything in the future because it's really complex and we could throw stuff away. So it's encouraging us not to understand a lot of complex things. I worry about that. But I do think it's making us more curious. When it comes to the creative front, it's already employing more people. Even when you do videos for social media, people are using AI platforms to, give me 5 clips and it spits out the clips. And so those people are employed as social influencers and they're using AI heavily. In advertising, all the gatekeepers, the walls are down. There's people throughout the globe that are creating work that never would have got to an American eyeball if it was brokered through a big ad agency. Mm-hmm. Now people in let's say Brazil, really creative countries are creating stuff and it's just coming in and it's not being gatekept by larger institutions. Mm-hmm. And ultimately more people are employed in the creative services industries.
Yeah. And I think people have to have some context when it comes to AI is that, particularly AI really relies upon the human mind still. So the bottom line, it's scraping and getting information from what's out there already. Anytime anybody goes into ChatGPT and it's a public forum, many of your AI models, it's learning off of what you're putting in there. So you have to be careful. I mean, a lot. Some people think of, hey, I had this idea, and and I had this idea, and I put it in ChatGPT, and then next time someone else stole it. Well, because the information when you're going to ChatGPT, if you're going to these publicly accessible models, you're not really using it for free. It's actually using you to learn. So that's number one. Number two is you got to be very careful about what you ask. It's going to give you what you want to hear. So you got to be careful about how you ask it and what you're asking for, because it's going to give you an answer you want to hear, because it's going to try to satisfy you with.
And it's really good at that.
Yeah, it's really good at that. So for good or bad. So like you said, it's great for creative, but you still have to have a sizable knowledge of the product, of what you're asking for, some background, because it can give you, like you said, general ideas, but like real complex, it's more difficult.
I think about it, it's like the Oracle of Delphi. You can go ask it any question and it'll give you the greatest wisdom in the world. And you walk away and you still have to do something with that wisdom. Right?
Exactly.
And you do. And you have to put in your head and how you're going to respond to that wisdom. And it doesn't give you the final answer. It gives you what you need to complete your vision. And a lot of people think it's the final answer. And now we're getting really good. I could read through it. Like somebody sent me, or, this is interesting. So our water heater broke, and, and so I'm texting with the plumber. Well, now the plumber's using Claude, and all of a sudden his texts are like, damn, so it helps in that way, but it's also transparent,
I can tell. I mean, I think you can read it and tell, like,
100%.
And sometimes I'll hear people use, you can tell when you see
a double-edged sword. So it goes back to that thing. Our desire is to kind of like do less work, I must say. And it gives you a lot of these shortcuts. So unless you're really on top of it, you could degrade your system.
Correct.
If you are on top of it, it could turbocharge you, And I guess this is no different of any tool ever devised. Some people use it to do less work, and some people use it to see their vision come to life.
Correct. Yeah. Well, Rob, I have to tell you, thank you. And let me ask you this: if somebody wants to get a hold of you, you're amazing. You're absolutely a brilliant person, and I love the fact that you read so many books every day and you educate yourself, and that you really push out there the importance of making sure you're constantly learning, making sure you're constantly improving, that you don't kind of rest on your laurels, because these are the kind of things. And do you have any final thoughts? And also, if you can if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah. So to get a hold of me, I'm just Rob Bagot, ROBBAGOT at LinkedIn. Just, reach out and connect, and we'll connect. And then you could DM me if you have any questions. That's a great way of doing it.
You have a website as well?
Yeah. And then we're storymachinefilms.com, storymachinefilms.com. And what you're going to see there is a lot of just my traditional advertising. And all of it is, I wrote it, directed it, and finished it, post-produced it. So I kind of I do beginning to end is kind of like my thing.
I know. And I saw you did a lot of, you've done, like you said, there's so many I can mention off. There's this, I watched many of them. You did a great series, a mini documentary series for Callaway, but it's amazing on Phil, on Gary Player, Phil Mickelson. Just Ernie Els. It just goes on and on. You've done great stuff. You did one for USC, ironically, my program.
That one was super well received, and I love doing that thing. And that was
it's a beautiful video. It's beautifully done. I have to tell you, for my own selfish reasons.
Thank you.
You've done so many great things. You did one from the Oakland Museum, which is near and dear to my heart. You did a great job, but you've done a lot of amazing work. So can they see some of that work on your website as well?
Yeah. So if they go to Story Machine Films, they'll see all that work, most of it, a lot of it. And that's there. And I need to update it because I need to reflect all the AI work I've done. Go to Story Machine. You'll get I think you'll get my vibe. I like human stories. I like listening and learning from other people. And a lot of what I do is about that.
Well, you're just you're just extremely intelligent, and you're very, very forward thinking. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
100%. Great questions. This has been thrilling.
No, this is amazing. And thank you everybody for listening to this podcast. And until next time, we'll get another amazing guest. We're probably going to have Rob on again. And we've had so many amazing guests. I have to like circle back and have him back on again. And Rob's going to be one of those. And thank you so much, Robin.
Thank you, Martin, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, my friend. Take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.